Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Beth Marsh and I am the Director of Membership and Communication with the Organization of American Historians. We are joined today by two archivists from the National Archives and Records Administration. Rose Buchanan has been with NARA for 7 years. She is currently an archivist at the Archives I reference branch at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., where she works primarily with headquarters level records of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and other federal civilian agencies. She has a master's in public history from North Carolina State University and a master's in library science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Elizabeth Burns is an archivist at the National Archives in Kansas City, who also serves as NARA's subject matter expert for immigrant records and is the lead archivist for Alien Files reference. She received a bachelor's degree in history at Truman State University and a master's degree in history and museum studies at the University of St. Louis. Thank you for joining us today for the latest in our professional development webinar series. This series is made possible by a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. If you have questions for our presenters today, please use the Q&A box. If you have any issues with Zoom or have a question for OAH staff, you can reach me or my colleague Sydney in the chat. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rose and Elizabeth. Thank you.
All right,
thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth. Let me get the screen share started here. All right. Is this good, Elizabeth?
Yep, I can see it. We're good to go. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today. We're excited to talk to you about conducting research at the National Archives. Rose and I will actually alternate speaking throughout the presentation. Today, we'll be focusing on resources that can help you find and access NARA records. We'll specifically focus on resources that are available online because, of course, we're still in a semi-virtual world with the pandemic. But these resources are also useful more broadly for understanding the scope of our records and for laying the groundwork for more in-depth research and even an on-site visit if needed. Slide. So let's start with an overview of NARA. Slide. NARA houses the historical, non-current records of our US federal government, not state governments, not local governments, just the federal government. We do not house all records ever created by the federal government. About 2 to 5% of records created annually are deemed permanent according to federal laws and record schedules. But this still amounts to billions of pages of records, as well as thousands of gigabytes of electronic records. The numbers we have on the screen are probably out of date. We get a lot of new records frequently. Our records document all 3 branches of the federal government. The executive branch, which includes federal agencies like the Bureau of Indian Affairs, National Park Service. The judicial branch, which includes the federal court system and the US Supreme Court. And the legislative branch, which includes the US Senate and the House of Representatives. In terms of time period, our records span from the Revolutionary War era to, in some instances, the present. The specific time frame of records we have depends on the federal agency or office. In many cases, records created within the past couple of decades are still in an agency's custody. Slide. There are 43 NARA locations in 17 states and Washington, D.C. NARA facilities provide permanent archival storage, temporary federal record center storage, and include presidential libraries. It's important to be aware that there is no duplication of original records between the facilities. Records maintained by my office here in Kansas City are only available in Kansas City and cannot be loaned to other NARA locations. Rose and I work for the Research Services branch of the National Archives, and within Research Services, our headquarters sites in Washington, D.C. and College Park, Maryland, generally maintain records that were created by the highest offices of a given agency or branch of the government, while the field sites across the country have holdings representing records created at an agency's regional offices and documents from the lower federal court systems. Rose will touch more on this divide in record locations momentarily. Slide. One of the most important things to know up front about our records is that they are not arranged by name, subject, or geographic location, nor do we have a consolidated index or database of all of our records that we can check immediately to identify specific documents. Rather, our records are arranged by the federal agency or court that created them in numbered record groups. And then in what we call entries or series, which are essentially collections of records that reflect a particular function or activity of a federal agency or office. So an example would be records of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, INS, which are in record group 85. Within record group 85, we have a specific series or collection of records called the subject and policy files, which are essentially administrative correspondence of the INS central office. The subject and policy files are arranged numerically by file number. This information, the record group and the series number, can be obtained in our online catalog, which we'll talk about in more detail. They can also be found by consulting finding aids on site or by writing to our staff directly. Slide.
So because our records are not arranged by name or subject, it's important to have a little information up front to be able to conduct research effectively. We've listed some of the questions on this slide that you can think about depending on your particular research topic. In all cases, it's important to consider the research topic through the lens of the federal government. In other words, what federal agency or office would have been involved, or what federal agency or office would a person have interacted with. It's also important to think about when an event or interaction took place, as federal agencies changed over time and their activities and jurisdictions also changed. It's also important to be aware that the majority of records at NARA have not yet been digitized, and the physical records are housed at our many different facilities around the country, which Elizabeth already touched on. Our DC facility, also known as Archives 1, houses textual or paper records, specifically pre-World War I records of the U.S. Army, pre-World War II records of the U.S. Navy, and a smattering of federal civilian or non-military agencies. In general, those records are some of the oldest in NARA's holdings. We also have the Center for Legislative Archives, which houses historical records of Congress, the National Archives Museum, and the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, which is NARA's grant-giving body. We have another archives facility in the DC area, the National Archives at College Park, or Archives 2, that generally houses more modern textual records, as well as our special media holdings, such as photographs, motion pictures, electronic records, etc. And we have the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, which stores modern military and federal civilian personnel records. Additionally, as Elizabeth mentioned, we have a number of field archives facilities, federal record centers, and presidential libraries around the country. So records related to a particular topic can be dispersed across the network of NARA facilities, meaning that you may be looking at research at a number of locations, depending on your topic. In terms of starting your research with online resources, we've listed here the NARA sources that we're going to touch on today. They're all free to access from anywhere. We also do have institutional partnerships with several organizations like Ancestry.com, which feature copies of many of our records that are related to genealogy research. We're not really going to go into those today, but if you have questions about those partners, we can try to answer them at the end. So let's start with archives.gov, our main public-facing website. Here you can see the homepage, complete, of course, with our COVID banner right now that provides information about how NARA has adjusted our operations because of the pandemic. In terms of research, it's good to start with the Research Our Records option, which will take you to our research portal page. From here, there's a lot you can do in terms of getting to additional online resources, whether that's informational web pages or online catalogs and finding aids. But let's say you have a specific topic in mind. You can click on the Research a Specific Topic tab and be taken to our Research by Topics portal page. As you can see, this page is arranged by broad categories like people and places, but it includes links to additional pages with more information. For example, under the Foreign Affairs, Military Records, and Investigations category, you could click on the link for Wars and Military Records and be taken to our Military Records Research portal page. You can probably see a theme in terms of us having portal pages related to particular topics and records. The Military Records portal has links for researching by military branch, as you can see here, or if you scroll further down, there'll be links for researching by war or conflict. Those pages will provide narrative overviews of our records related to each topic, examples of records, links to finding aids, and so on. Go back out to our homepage and you work your way through our Research Our Records tab, you can find pages related to particular topics. But you can also get a sense of what records are housed at different NARA facilities by consulting each facilities page. And those can be accessed by clicking on our Visit Us link you can see here on our homepage. So if you click on that, it'll take you to a list of all of our research facilities. And if you click on the link for a particular site, we can just go with the DC one here, you'll be taken to the main building page. All of the facilities building pages follow a similar format. So if you clicked on the link for NARA at Kansas City, for example, the layout would be similar. But from each of these pages, you can see contact information, information about research room hours, a link to more information about genealogy and historical research. And then you could see another further breakdowns of types of records that are at each of our facilities.
Now we want to touch briefly on a specific resource available through our website, the Guide to Federal Records. Slide. The guide was originally compiled and published in print form back in the 1990s. So this is a digital version of that publication. The guide can be useful when you're starting your research at NARA because it provides a high-level overview of the types of records we have for most federal agencies and courts. It also provides basic administrative history, and it can include and give you the record group number that you'll need to dig deeper into a particular agency or court's records. Slide. You can search the guide by keyword or by record group number if you already know it, for example, because maybe you've seen a reference elsewhere on the website or found it in a secondary sources citation. Slide. So if I were interested in researching Native American records, I may want to search the keywords Indian Affairs. Slide. Or if I already know that Bureau of Indian Affairs records were in record group 75, I could search by that number. The keyword search will return a list of results that you can browse, search by record group number, and will also take you directly to a record groups page. Slide. In either case, in this example, you wind up here at the page for record group 75, Records of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Slide. If you scroll down the page, you can see an administrative history, including when the agency was established, what cabinet level departments it's been in over the years. You can also see references to related record groups, records like the Office of the Secretary for Interior in this case. Slide. Now, as I mentioned, the guide can be useful for getting a basic sense of what NARA has for a particular agency or court, but it does not provide specific series level information or indicate if records are available online. For that information, you'll want to consult other resources like our microfilm catalog and the National Archives catalog. Slide.
So let's talk about our microfilm catalog first. Back in the day when microfilm was all the rage, NARA microfilmed many commonly requested series of records. So now that we're in a digital age and NARA is increasingly getting digitized versions of our microfilm online, that means that the microfilm catalog can be a good resource to check to see if records are already available as microfilm and if that microfilm is now available online. So here is the homepage for our microfilm catalog. On this page, you can perform a basic keyword search in the search bar. Sticking with our Indian Affairs example, let's say you want to see what microfilm is available for the Bureau of Indian Affairs and you search by keywords Indian Affairs. You'll get a list of results. In this case, you get 66 different hits. And for each one, you'll see a certain set of information. So you'll get the publication number, which is the identifier for that particular set of microfilm. You'll get the publication title, the record group number and title, and then the number of rolls or reels, and the digital availability. So whether it's in our catalog or on partner site. If you were to click on the first result here, which in this case represents records of the Michigan Superintendency of Indian Affairs, you get a little more information, including a list of NARA locations that have copies of the microfilm, and a link to a PDF pamphlet with even more information. So these pamphlets are especially useful because they typically provide background information on the creating agency or office, a description of the microfilm records and their arrangement, and a microfilm roll list. So when you head back out to that page, you can see that there's a link to the digitized records in NARA's catalog. If you were to click this link, it would take you directly to the digitized records in our catalog. If using a different example, if we see that the records are digitized on a partner site, you can click this link and it'll take you to a page on archives.gov with a list of our microfilm publications digitized by our partners. And on this page, you can search by the microfilm publication number. In this example, it was N668 for ratified Indian treaties. And the list will filter to show which of our partners have digitized that publication.
Now let's talk about the most extensive resource we have for identifying records in our holdings, the National Archives Catalog. Slide. Our catalog includes descriptions of our archival records, typically at the series level, not the individual document level. The catalog also includes a growing number of digitized and electronic records, authority records for select organizations and individuals, lists to NARA web pages, and user-contributed tags and transcriptions. Slide. What you see on this page is the basic catalog search. This is, if you went to catalog.archives.gov, this is what would come up, but be aware the picture in the background rotates periodically, so it will look different pretty much every single time that you go to the page. Slide. But let's say that we start here and search for census rolls because we're researching Bureau of Indian Affairs records and we want to see what tribal census rolls are available. Slide. When we do that search, we get hundreds of thousands of results, way too many to go through individually. Fortunately, there are ways to refine your search results, which you can see listed on the left side of the results page. Slide. These refinements include the data source, level of description, type of materials, and more. You can also sort your results and export them to a PDF or CSV file to browse that way. Slide. Another option is to start off with a more defined search. You can do that by using our advanced search option, which allows you to search by record group number, date range, type of materials, NARA location, and more.
So let's walk through a couple of sample searches in the catalog. Let's say you were looking for 20th century maps related to the Klamath tribes. You don't know of a specific map you want per se, but you just want to know what's generally available related to this topic. So you could start with the advanced search page and search for specific terms the tribes are known by, the type of materials, which would be maps and charts, and a date range. I know that this is very small, so I will blow up this information so you can see it a little bit easier. Note here that the catalog does support Boolean operators like and, or not. So you can use those operators in your keyword search to create more complex searches. So looking at your search results using these various advanced search fields, you can see that one of the options is a digitized map of the Klamath Reservation. When you click that option, you'll be taken to the items page where you can then view the image in the main view screen or download a copy by clicking the blue download arrow beneath the view screen. If you scroll down the page, you can also see more information, including links to the series that the map is a part of and information about access or use restrictions. In this case, that's unrestricted. At the bottom of the page is contact information for the custodial unit. In this case, our cartographic branch at the National Archives at College Park. Back up at the top of the page, you also get a visual representation of the records hierarchy. That is how this particular map fits into a larger series, which fits into a larger record group. You can click on the series link to be taken to the series page, where you can see a link to other digitized items from this series. You can click that link in turn to then browse all of the digitized records for that series so far. But let's say that you have a very specific file you are looking for. You are looking for a US Supreme Court case, Washington v. United States from 2017 that relates to tribal fishing rights in Washington state. So you start with the catalog and you drop that name into it and you see what you get, which is yet again, hundreds of thousands of results, way too many to go through. So the first ones look like they may be referring to a court case, but not the one you want. So you try searching by the name of the court case in quotation marks, because that would make the catalog search exactly those terms in that order. And this time you get 11 results, none of which look relevant. So what would you do in this instance? One tip is to approach your search from the standpoint of the agency or court. In this case, the US Supreme Court. So if you can figure out what the record group number is for the Supreme Court records, you can do an advanced search for that record group and see what you get. If you didn't already know the Supreme Court record group number, you could check the Guide to Federal Records and see that it's record group 267. Then you could consider modifying your search terms. For example, using more generic terms related to court cases, like case file or docket. You could consider how the case got to the Supreme Court, which in this instance was through the appellate process when it was appealed from lower courts. Or you can consider limiting your search to the series level of description to weed out those superfluous OCR hits for the digitized items. So here, if you implemented all of these various tips, here is what it would look like. And again, I'll blow it up because it's a little small. Search terms would be appellate case files. You'd refine by the record group number collection ID as 267, and then the level of description as the series. And when you do that, you actually get 7 results, which is much more reasonable to go through. And the 6th option down is the appellate jurisdiction case files, which seems promising, right? Based on what you're looking for and what you know about how Washington v. US got to the Supreme Court. When you click on this link, you're taken to the series level description of the records, which includes a note that not all records in the series are available digitally. This can clue you in as to why you didn't get any relevant hits in your previous search. Likely, and I can tell you that in this case it is, the case file for Washington v. US is not digitized. And so of course your searches didn't pick it up. But if you scroll down the page, there again, the link that not everything's online. If you scroll down the page, you can see a general description in the scope and content note of the types of documentation that are in these case files, petitions and briefs. If that sounds useful, you can reach out to the custodial unit. In this example, it's my office, for additional assistance. If you email us, you would want to provide us with as much information as possible about what you're looking for, whether that's the court case name, the case number if you have it, and the link to the catalog page you consulted if you did consult the catalog.
So the thought process for advanced search formulas can really be applied across all of NARA's holdings. This table highlights some examples for records maintained here in Kansas City. In each scenario, what I was looking for was case files, but the supporting fields of my search varied based on my area of interest. So for example, records of insolvencies are captured in bankruptcy case files that can be found in several different record groups due to changes in administration of bankruptcy proceedings by different courts over time. But as long as you can input the relevant state in your search results, you'll capture all available possibilities from the courts in that geographic area. On the other hand, inmate case files are only going to be found in record group 129, which is the Bureau of Prisons. So your search can be focused to a single record group. If you haven't played around with NARA's catalog to try out different search functionalities, it really is worth the time. Slide. One final online resource that we want to touch on is access to archival databases, AAD. Slide. AAD provides online access to records in a small selection of historic databases preserved permanently in NARA. The Electronic Records Division selected the data sets included in AAD because the records identify specific people, geographic areas, organizations, and dates. The records cover a wide variety of civilian and military functions and have many genealogical, social, political, and economic research uses. Among many other topics, records in AAD can include things like records of passengers who arrived at the ports of Baltimore, Boston, New Orleans, New York, and Philadelphia during the 19th century. Specifically, those data sets reflect entries during the Irish famine and specific ethnic groups such as Russians, Germans, and Italians. Other topics could be military casualties from the Korean War through the War on Terrorism, Japanese Americans interned during World War II, military operations during the Vietnam War, and even things like enlistment records, including for the Women's Army Auxiliary. Slide. There are 3 basic approaches to research in AAD. The first is a free text search box that allows you to search all of the records in AAD. The second is a browse by category function that provides you with lists of related series on broad topics and events. And the third is a browse by subject function that is useful when your research has a more narrow scope. AAD really is an underutilized resource that is worth perusing as you approach your research at NARA, especially if it's something that you're not familiar with. Slide.
So here's where we normally talk about on-site research, which is often the next step after doing your preliminary research online. However, unfortunately, because of COVID, many of our research rooms around the country, and I think actually at this exact moment, all of them are currently closed. As public health conditions improve in different areas, the research rooms in these areas, of course, will start to reopen. So make sure to keep checking NARA's COVID-19 updates page. And if you're interested in research at a particular facility and already know that facility, continue to check their specific page for the latest reopening information. And so now we know that was a whirlwind of information, and I'm sure you all have some questions. We'll certainly take some now and are happy to, but if you think of something later, you are always welcome to reach out to one of us or to our offices or to NARA's general reference inquiry inbox as well. So I'm going to end this slide. We'll drop this information in the chat too so you can have it, but I'm going to stop presenting so I can actually see you all. If I can stop presenting. I don't know if that was successful, but I can see you all, so we'll go with it.
Hi, Elizabeth and Rose, this is Beth. Before we start getting questions from the audience, would you be willing to touch a little bit on the subject matter experts program? Elizabeth, I know you are one of the subject matter experts, and maybe if you could just explain what that is and how the folks in those positions would be helpful to historians researching on any variety of topics.
So the subject matter expert program started about 3 years ago. Currently, there are 9 subject matter experts, and there are 3 additional positions, I believe, that have been approved that will be filled soon. We cover a variety of topics. My specific area is immigrant records. There's also one for Bureau of Indian Affairs, court records, let's see, Holocaust era assets, civil rights, African-American history, several military groups. It's really kind of a broad spectrum of topics that we address, but our role in the agency is to help facilitate expanded access to records within our subject areas. So specifically, we're looking at things like how can we improve materials on the web page? What can we do to help promote standardization of descriptions within our catalog so that items are more findable? We provide public programming. We work with staff within NARA to kind of help facilitate the reference process. We write blog posts on History Hub. If you're not familiar with History Hub, that's a reference resource that's available through the National Archives, and staff and members of the public work to help answer questions that are posed there. I will say, though, that I have found History Hub can be a little more useful for genealogists than it can for historians. I find when it comes to historians, you're probably better served going directly to the offices that you might want to interact with and just having that one-on-one interaction with staff who are going to be, more familiar with the records that could be useful for your topic. The subject matter experts, we don't necessarily work a lot one-on-one with researchers outside of working with individuals who might come to us with questions that have stumped other offices. Or for example, I work with a lot of people that end up with the National Archives at Kansas City because of the kinds of records that we maintain. Beth mentioned at the beginning, I serve as our lead for Alien Files Reference. That's a set of records that were created by the Immigration and Naturalization Service. So I end up working with a lot of researchers who are kind of doing broad immigrant research using those records, or naturalization records from the federal courts, things like that.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Sydney. Well, actually, I'll just go ahead and relay Tanner's question. Is it possible to request an entire unit's records? guessing military unit.
Military unit. In entire units records, I can say probably unlikely, just because a unit, the volume or extent to which a unit would have records is too large to copy in general. I mean, it could be, I'm thinking because we have Civil War records at our DC facility, one unit's records can be, dozens and dozens of boxes. So that can be just beyond our staff capacity to reproduce on your behalf. But if it's something, if you're looking for, depending on where the units were at a particular time, or what actions they were a part of, I mean, you could reach out to a staff member and they might be able to help you narrow down to something more specific, or help you point you in the direction of where that information might have been compiled, say in some kind of report that might be more easily findable and digestible. So that's, if you have a more specific unit or time period that you're interested in, you can let us know, and we could maybe provide a more specific answer. Yeah, okay.
So while we wait for more questions to come in, a question about the presidential library. Can you go more into depth about, how to access different presidential libraries, where they're located, all of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, so there are presidential libraries all across the country. Each of them have their own webpage. Their pages won't look like the pages that we discussed today necessarily. They've all kind of got their own approach to their individualized pages, but it's the same premise that when you go and visit a web page for one of the presidential libraries, you'll be able to access some of their digitized materials. You'll be able to look and see what finding aids they have available online. In that case, what you'll be considering is what kind of records are you hoping to track down from that presidential term. So you'll need to, keep in mind which president you're interested in, and then go directly to the webpage for that presidential library. It's probably going to be your best start, I would say. Although they do push their materials into the main National Archives catalog, their individualized web pages tend to be the more useful resources. I actually did a kind of a short-term cross-training with the Truman Presidential Library, and did an internship during college with the Truman Presidential Library. And I can say from my experiences there that really the way that they tend to approach their holdings and how they provide public access, the webpage is going to be your strongest starting point for that. The big thing to keep in mind, though, is that there are not presidential libraries for every single president in U.S. history. So you'll want to kind of keep in mind what president you're looking for, and then they select the location for their library. So it's not something that NARA is determining where the records are located. It's something that they've put in play.
Makes sense. Thank you. So now a question from one of our attendees. This is pre-pandemic, 2018 to 2019. I tried for over a year to get a research card, and I feel like I'm missing something. Could you explain the researcher's card?
Sure. So at least the way we've done it, we've approached it before pre-pandemic. For us in downtown DC and at our College Park sites, you can get a researcher card if you come on site. And all you do is we have a little PowerPoint slide you go through, kind of an orientation that just talks about how we handle the records in the research room, the rules, don't bring a drink into the research room, don't use a pen, things like that. And then we just, get some contact information for you. You show your ID, and then we would print out a researcher card for you. So it was all done in person at our sites in the past. Now that our research rooms aren't open right now, but when we were open during the pandemic, there was a little more flexibility in terms of being able to do some of that offsite. And then when you arrived, you would already have your researcher form filled out. We would just give you the card, and it'd be very more streamlined. But that's the way it used to work. I'm so sorry you had a poor experience in the past. Yeah, hopefully that will be changed in the future. If you want to reach out to us with a more specific question, please do.
I just realized that I may have muted. Could you hear me ask the last question? No. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for responding to that question. Another question from the Q&A box. Could you introduce the documents about American foreign policy on East Asia in the 1990s?
Could you read that one more time? I'm sorry. I think I got
Yeah. Could you introduce the documents about American foreign policy on East Asia in the 1990s? If that's not possible, we can move on to a different question and potentially hit that at another time.
I can say I will be happy to say up front that I have no experience in that area personally. But what if someone came to me with that question? I would say talk to our staff at College Park. We do, one of the subject matter specialists is in State Department records. Now for the 1990s, that might be too recent for records that would be in NARA's holdings. Those records might still be in the custody of the State Department. But our College Park folks would probably be able to better set you up with who you would need to talk to, whether it's them or someone at still with the agency.
Okay, thank you. And then another question, with archives closed due to COVID, what kind of assistance can archivists provide to researchers? Would they be able to provide a copy of the document if researchers provide its exact location?
Yes, definitely. Even though our facilities are closed to the public, staff are able to go on site in very limited capacity. Right now we're at 25% staffing. But because we do have time on site, if you're able to get us enough information that we can work with you and communicate with you to narrow in on specifically what you're wanting, we can definitely provide copies. That's what I've been doing every time that I've been on site over the past couple of months, is just pushing out copies to all of the researchers that I'm working with. So that's definitely possible. It is one of those things though where you'll want to connect directly with staff so that you can really hone in on what it is that you're wanting. They can get you a fee for the copy reproduction cost, and then you can facilitate ordering copies from there.
And I will say I know you all have been extremely patient throughout the pandemic. Please continue to be patient with us, because in many instances, offices do have backlogs for the reproduction orders because they've been building up as the facilities have closed. So we're working on them as much as we can and as actively as we can. But just please continue to be patient. We know it's not ideal.
Okay, yeah, patience is key in this time. So another question from Tanner. Do you know off the top of your head, is there a certain NARA location that I should contact about military records of the Korean War?
Probably our College Park site, especially if you're looking at the unit level and not looking for a specific serviceman or woman, service person, contact our College Park, which I can drop their email address into our chat. They have unit level military records for that time period. Their email is archives2reference@nara.gov.
Wonderful. And then another question, are there resources available for K-12 educators? Do you guys have any guides available for, primary sources that may be more accessible in a younger classroom?
We definitely do. One resource, if you're not familiar with it, that you should certainly check out is Docs Teach. It is a web page that is specifically set up to help teachers facilitate learning in the classroom. You can look at different documents. In some cases, there are actually kind of lesson plans that are laid out about how you could approach a set of documents or an individual document. But yeah, there are some wonderful resources out there. If you go to the main archives.gov webpage, there's actually a link there that is specific for educators. So be sure to check out that page. And there's really just some fantastic content out there that our education staff has created. Beyond that, we can also sometimes offer programs that are available for students at different grade levels and areas of experience. So there are definitely resources out there. Go to archives.gov and you can connect with it through that.
Thank you so much. We're waiting on some more questions to come in. But I think an important thing to discuss is, so you guys talked about how you can only access the stuff that's at a specific archive. Are there ways to like make that process a little bit more streamlined if you require sources that are at different archives or different branches?
I guess I would say really you need to work with each office individually. You know, the staff between offices sometimes will communicate on things, but for the most part, we're all kind of working our own sets of records. So, you know, if you know that you need to talk to people at 3 different offices, you need to email the 3 different offices and connect with those staffs individually so that they can speak to the records. If you're approaching something and you're not sure what offices you need to be talking to, you know, kind of making a general approach to the National Archives, whether that be going through the Inquire account that we'd included on our contact slide, or whether that be reaching out to an office that you think is going to be relevant to your search, and then they can kind of help refer you on from there. But in terms of kind of streamlining it in kind of a single line of communication, I don't know that you're really going to be able to do that just because of the way that our offices are spread out and our holdings are spread.
Yeah, and I would add to that that we mentioned it at the beginning, but depending on your topic, keeping in mind that the difference between the headquarters levels and field office records, there can be a lot of integration in terms of content. You know, they're communicating, headquarters and field are communicating back and forth all the time. So, you know, we in all of our various locations are absolutely aware of the different records that exist. And so if you came to my office, say, and you were looking for Bureau of Indian Affairs records, we would have the headquarters and we could tell you what's available there. We would probably also direct you to the appropriate field office for the field office records of the BIA too that would be relevant. So we'll point you in the direction, hopefully. But as Elizabeth said, yeah, you probably want to connect specifically with folks at whichever site as best you can, because they're going to know the records the best. They're working with them day to day.
Thank you. We have a question from Sue. I'm looking at agriculture in Wisconsin during the New Deal. Do you have any idea where it would be best to start?
So I guess I would say from the field perspective, I would talk to the National Archives at Chicago. They maintain records from the federal agencies out of Wisconsin. And so if it's going to be something that was created at the local level, Chicago is going to be your best resource for getting that information. But I'll bump it over to Rose because there's also, again, like we were saying, you've got to think about the level of information that you're seeking. And even though Wisconsin is a specific location, there's still likely going to be headquarter level records.
Right. And so if you were going at the topic from more of a high level policy perspective, you probably would want to dive into the headquarters records, which in this case, they'd probably be at our College Park site that has Department of Agriculture records, other various New Deal agency records, if you're looking at a specific New Deal agency, so that they could kind of give you an overview of what they would have.
Thank you. So I know you guys referenced earlier the difference between looking for military records and genealogy records. Do you have any advice on how to, approach genealogy research versus how to approach military research? Are there, some specific differences that maybe go into that, just as like a broad how to direct your research?
In terms of, well, I mean, I guess I would also say, it depends on what you're looking for specifically in terms of military research, because if you're looking for your ancestor who served in the military, you're doing both military and genealogy research. But in genealogy's case, having a specific person and having specific information up front about the person, whether that's their birth date, where they lived, what interaction that they had with a federal agency that you're looking for, whether you're looking for them in a census per se versus a military service record. I mean, thinking about the person from the lens of their interaction with the federal agency, that's going to be your place to start. Versus military research, if you're looking for a particular time period or conflict, you can start at it from that angle. Say if you're looking for records of the Civil War, and then you drill down to a particular military branch within the Civil War, so records of the US Army, drill down further to a particular unit, whether that's the 21st US Infantry, you can go further down into unit level records. So it's really just getting a sense of where you are in history, first time period, a sense of geography, and then for the individual genealogist, information about that specific person. But we didn't show it in the slides, but we do have extensive genealogy resources on our website. A lot of tips and tricks about how to get started, overviews. One of the main pieces of advice we tell folks is if you're just getting started in your research, in your genealogy research, census records are a really good place to start, because theoretically they should capture everyone. Now we know that that's not always true. There were people that were missed at various times, but that's a good resource to start with.
Yeah, and kind of building on what Rose just said in terms of, if you're approaching looking at military records and you're wanting to do it at an individual level, the big thing to think about is time frame. If it was early military that you're looking for their personnel file or perhaps a pension file, you're going to be looking at Rose's location. If you're looking kind of World War II and after, you're going to be with the National Archives at St. Louis or the National Personnel Records Center, which is in St. Louis as well. But on the archives.gov webpage, one of the big links at the top, one of the big color blocks is veterans records. And so you can go there and really get some good guidance about how to approach that. One thing that I will say, just because I know it can get a little convoluted, is that if it ends up that you need a record out of St. Louis, one of the best ways to do that is to submit an SF-180 form. And there's a link to that on the webpage that you can get a hold of. But people will try to do it in a lot of different ways. And just talking to the staff there in St. Louis, they've consistently said that the SF-180 is kind of their preferred method because it makes things a lot easier as they're approaching their reference work.
Thank you so much. And then in the context of getting information and contacting various NARA branches, Tanner has another question about what kind of information you should provide when emailing NARA for help. Can you guys just give us a quick rundown of what all you should include in an email to make the process as streamlined as possible?
I would say always err on the side of providing more information than less. I can't, we get a number of emails sometimes that are saying, they give you all this great information for genealogy about they're looking for their ancestor, but they never provide us with a name or anything that we could help them search on. So more information is always better. If you've seen a citation in a secondary source and you're looking to find that same record, send us that citation and we can at least try to help you parse out where that might be. If you've looked at something in the catalog, whether that's the National Archives catalog or the microfilm catalog, and you have a National Archives identifier, that's very useful for us. Every page in the National Archives catalog has a unique identifier. You'll see it in the URL at the top of the page. It'll be catalog.archives.gov/ID/long chain of number. And that's the number that will cue us in, take us back to that page, and we can go from there. We can track down the records in our physical facilities. We can find possibly other finding aids that are key to that series that may not be online yet, things like that. If you have any kind of date range, if you've got looking for a specific person, any more information is just always helpful. But those are some of the main ones, I would say. I'm sure Elizabeth has other things that are useful.
Yeah, I was going to say same premise. Just the more information you can provide, the better. Be sure that you include any of your personal contact information in case we have additional questions. It's always helpful to make sure that we've got your information correct. Even when you're sending an email, it's sometimes helpful to include your preferred email. Unfortunately, our email system sometimes does wonky things with people's email addresses. And so just to cover all the bases, it's a good idea. But I would say, yeah, when you're emailing about something, make sure that you're very clear about if you have an idea of a federal agency that might have been involved, it's good to include the name of that federal agency. If you're searching for court records, be sure that you explicitly say, what location, what city, what state do you think that the action occurred in? Like Rose said, a lot of times what makes things the hardest and what makes for more back and forth is when we don't have enough information to really do effective searching on our end, because we just don't have the right sets of details. So, if you're searching for a court case, we need to know where you think the court case occurred, what time frame you think the court case occurred in, who the case parties might be for the case, knowing what kind of case, is it a criminal action? Is it civil? Is it something that might have been appealed? Is it something that went to the Supreme Court? The more information you can include in your request on the front end, the better. I know some researchers feel like they don't want to dump it all at once, but honestly, for us, that can get us going a lot quicker.
Thank you so much. This is not a question. I just wanted to read it out loud. Thank you for this. I am on a committee looking to add a name to our Civil War monument, and this individual is the only Black man that served from our town and was in the 54th, made famous by the movie Glory, and was not seen after the assault on Fort Wagner. I plan on checking for the website, then the appropriate NARA location, as well as genealogy information on the NARA sites now. This webinar has been super helpful. So just wanted to give you guys the kudos for that. But I do have another question about We Rule, the Civics for All of Us initiative that is recently, been started. Could you guys just discuss that a little bit or provide a little bit of information about what that education initiative is and what it's meant for, if you have any information?
Lucy, can you read that again? I apologize. I don't think I heard what you...
I didn't either.
No, so it's about the Re-Rule Civics for All of Us, a new educational initiative from the National Archives that promotes civic literacy and engagement. Do you have any information about it? If not, that's okay. Okay.
Unfortunately,
right.
I don't have any information on that, but check archives.gov. You might be able to link with the office that would have the good information.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's good. See if any more questions come in. But is there anything else that you guys would just recommend for, a person who's approaching NARA for the first time, or, coming back and trying to get back into the swing of things after, or, as the pandemic continues on?
I guess my suggestion would just be to dive in, start looking at the different resources, going to archives.gov, and especially the Research Our Records tab. When you go into that section, and there's a lot of different tools there, there's a lot of different information that you can approach your research in different ways. And so I feel like it is set up in a way that can facilitate research for people who are coming at it from different points of view, or who might have different research skill levels. And so it's really a great way of tackling it in a different way. If you feel like you've hit something really hard for a long time in one way, sometimes going and looking on that page and saying, okay, well, maybe if I come at it from this direction now, I can find a new resource that I wasn't aware of, or find a different piece of information or a different way in. But honestly, another good thing is just to reach out and communicate one-on-one with staff. We have a lot of really knowledgeable staff across our agency that are here to help. And like Rose said, even if we don't have the information, we'll try to connect you to the office and to a person that really can help you move forward, whatever it is that you're looking at.
Yeah, and I would just add that if there's a silver lining at all to the pandemic, it's been that we have had, a lot of our staff have had time to get more finding aids and like box list, folder list, things like that into our catalog. We've had more time to update our website with additional informational pages. So there's new content that may not have been there before if you had looked pre-pandemic. So yeah, definitely take another dive in, and like Elizabeth said, always reach out. We are here and want to help you and answer your questions. That is our job and our passion. So definitely reach out and any questions you have.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I think we've all learned a great deal from this. For all of our attendees, as I mentioned before, this has been recorded. We will send you an email on Friday containing a link to the recording so that you can go back and peruse it at your leisure. And we will be having more professional development webinars in the near future that we will be announcing on our website and on social media. So again, thank you, Rose and Elizabeth. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.